This podcast is sponsored by valleygivesback.org. What will you be remembered for? Name a Valley nonprofit in your estate plan and create a legacy that tells future generations what mattered to you. Making a gift that costs nothing during your lifetime is easy and revocable if things change. With a planned gift, you have the power to impact the Valley forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Your action inspires others to make a difference in their own way. Remember the Valley. Ask your accountant, financial planner, or attorney about planned giving options. Plan now. Give later. Impact tomorrow. Learn more at valleygivesback.org.
For hundreds of years we've brought you the news. For the info we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs of inbreeding, TV sucking ideas from our head, public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur, yeah, ride the dinosaur. Our readers are in the open each day.
Hey everybody, welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indies weekly podcast. My name is Eugene Driscoll of valleyindy.org. That's a website that sometimes publishes local news. My guest, I'm going to get right to it. This is a big day for the Valley Indy. My guest is retiring Ansonia Police Chief Kevin Hale. Chief Hale, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Eugene. Thank you for letting me come in and talk to you today. Appreciate it.
Because you're retiring. Over
Yes.
the years, you've always been fair and professional. If you had a problem with something we wrote, back when there was a we at this thing, you would show up and express your concerns, and I always respected that because I think it made us better, because obviously we're not police officers, we're certainly not police chiefs,
Right.
So you helped us improve as reporters and local journalists by doing that, and I want to thank you for that on a personal note.
Thank you.
I was shocked. I figured the guy was just being nice to me all these years. The fact that you're actually here in the room, I'm like, all right, we did okay.
Yeah. Well, you know what, and I appreciate when it was you and now the two of you, and now just you. You guys are always fair with us as well. It's some hard stories you had to write on, no doubt, but you're always fair. You always try to get both sides, and I always felt, and others in our department, that we all have a job to do, and the days of no comment, those are long gone. That doesn't help us. Getting information out to the public, especially now in this crazy information age. But it doesn't help you either. And you have a job to do, and you're going to get the information. So why don't we just work together to put out what is necessary and timely, and what you need to do to write your stories as well. So that's the way I looked at it.
Now let's talk about, now that we've had our mutual love fest.
Yes, that's over with.
That's gone.
Yep.
You're retiring, Chief Hale.
I am. I'm retiring.
You're taking a job in the private sector. I don't know exactly what you're doing, but I'm going to guess. Are you going into teaching of some kind?
No, I'm already teaching.
That's what. All right.
Right. No, I'm gonna maintain that as long as I can. I'm already teaching at college, at post university. No, I'm taking a position with the Haynes Group in Seymour as the environmental health and safety manager.
What is that now? See, I'm surprised.
So they have in essence, the job is to make sure their multiple work sites are as safe as possible. There's a lot of OSHA compliance and policy work and such, and there's a lot that I'm going to have to learn a ton, which is part of the exciting part of this. It's a whole new challenge. It's a whole new direction.
What are you thinking?
Listen, this was, it's interesting, Eugene.
That sounds like too much work to me.
But that's okay. That's good. I'm not ready to go home and play golf, because I stink at golf. So that's and my wife's not going to let that happen anyways. But it's interestingly enough, I worked with the Haynes Construction before I became a police officer. Back in the 80s, I was a carpenter. And so now they've grown, and immensely, big company.
Yeah, they're an economic engine in the northern part
Yep.
of the valley.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
And who's the owner? His
Tom Haynes.
I was at he received an award from the Chamber of Commerce a couple of years ago.
Yep.
And he was great because he had his whole family there and his grandchildren. His story is really something. He seems like a legitimately nice guy.
Big family, and he's got a twin brother, Paul. And
oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and two big family guys. And so I'm really looking forward to it.
How did that come together? Like, of all the things, because now I'm surprised, because you strike me as a guy who's a lifelong learner. So I guess that part of it doesn't surprise me. But how did this particular job come your way? Well,
so I've been. This is a surprise to most everybody. Obviously, not to me, because I've been in this mode for a little bit of time now. I've been. It was never my goal to stay here until I was 65. That wasn't going to happen.
What's your age?
I'm 56.
Okay.
56. So I still got I got a long way to go. I got a lot of work left of me, and that was important to me. So I've been an Ansonia officer. It'll be 29 years the day before I leave, and 18 in this position. And that's a long time. That's a long time. I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed some days more than other days, but you also get a sense that it's and I tell the other guys too. You'll know when it's time to it's time to move on, and you don't want to stay too long. And sometimes in these positions, chief of police, you need maybe a different perspective, maybe fresh ideas and fresh thoughts and so forth. And I don't have a problem with that, and I recognize that. So this opportunity came along and sat down with them, and I was there are positions open all over the state, but this is a company that I know, the people, I know the owner obviously well, and the timing was right, and here we are.
And so when is your last day on the job in Ansonia?
My last official day is February 15th, Friday, February 15th.
Oh, wow. So that's coming right up.
It's coming up quickly.
Wow. Okay. And then now I know I read in the Connecticut Post that Lieutenant Andrew Cota, is he the interim? He's going to be interim chief, or is he
he's going to be the interim chief at midnight. He should be sworn in that day, and at midnight he'll take over as the chief, and then the police commission is formulating the plan, the process to fill that position permanently.
Do you make a recommendation as to who do you think should replace you, or is that not something you get involved in?
Well, yeah, it's to me it should without a doubt be somebody within the department.
Okay. Why is that?
Why? They're capable people up there. I have 100% confidence in that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you who, but there are multiple people that can do this job, and there are multiple people that can fill those positions moving up. So, complete confidence in that. I have complete confidence in that, and I believe the commission will too. So, that's in it. But what we're still waiting to see is what the process is going to be to fill this. Exciting. It's an exciting time for I really shocked people because I told nobody knew this.
Yeah, and it was a Friday press release. It was a traditional news dump, Chief Hale.
Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged. But it was I didn't, Eugene. I didn't want to say I'm going to retire 11 months from now. I did because then there's an eroding of influence, but more importantly, effectiveness. Because at some point it's like, all right, you can go now. We're all set. So I didn't want to have that long drawn out process. People think, he's a good guy, but when is he going to leave? I didn't want that.
You're not going to show up for work in cargo pants and a Hawaiian shirt.
No.
Different work ethic.
No, I'm going to take the last. I've got a couple of weeks vacation. I'm going to take before the 15th. So the first will be my last work day, February 1st, which is in 2 weeks.
Okay. So let's talk about your background a little, because that's what we do here at the Valley. When somebody says they're going to retire, then we bring them in and say, hey, who are you?
Who are you?
People love that. I know you're from Ansonia originally, or were you born in Derby?
No, I was born in Ansonia, born and raised in the North End.
Okay. And how many brothers, sisters?
I have one brother.
What did your dad do for a living? I know the answer to this, but tell us about your mother and father a little bit. What they do?
So my dad was born and raised in Seymour, and he was one of 9. And he was ended up being an electrical foreman at the old Bridgeport Brass, which is now where the Seymour Police Department is. That was their headquarters, and that old factory complex going all the way back through Stop and Shop and all the way back down around the corner over there. It became Seymour Specialty Wire. He worked there for think it was just under 40 years. And he was a volunteer firefighter with the Charter Hose, and I followed him. My brother and I both followed him over there. And he got into politics in the late 50s, early 60s, became the president of the Board of Aldermen. And then when Mayor Joe Doyle became the postmaster, my dad became mayor, and he was mayor for a little over 2 years. Got out. He was defeated in '69, and he just continued to work and stay busy. My mom was born and raised in Ansonia, one of 8, and she had jobs. I mean, she stayed home with me when I was growing up, and but then she's had various jobs. I remember my mom, both hardworking people, both of them. My mom would get on a bus. She would take the Valley Transit. Now, we lived up off of North Main Street, heading up towards Seymour. And she would get on the bus at 6:30 in the morning and ride the bus to work in New Haven. She worked at the Knights of Columbus, the big tall building down in the middle of downtown New Haven. And she'd work an 8-hour day, and then she'd ride the bus back and would get home at 6 o'clock at night. So those were long days for her, 12-hour days every day of the week. And so they were hardworking people.
And then with your dad being involved in politics, I mean, you were just a kid when he was mayor.
Right.
What was that like? Was it annoying to have I mean, in terms of if he's, there's a story written about him, and obviously when you're mayor, like 30% of the community doesn't support you because it's just the odds. But was that tough as a kid growing up, or? Well, and how did he handle it?
Well, my dad was he was very stoic. He was very very dignified, if you will, and he was the greatest generation. He was a nose gunner in a B-24. He flew 50 missions over Europe fighting Hitler, and so things didn't bother him, because if you got through that, then what else, what could be worse. So listen, when he was defeated, I was 7 years old, so I wasn't paying a lot of attention to the Register, the Journal Courier, the Evening Sentinel, or whatever the paper was. But I do remember him. At the time, being mayor was a part-time job. So he would work in the factory all day. He'd come home, and he'd take a shower, and sometimes he'd eat, sometimes he wouldn't. Then he'd go to his office at City Hall and be there till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night.
Oh, no, because it was literally a part-time job.
It was a part-time job. And then it seemed like every Saturday night there was some event they had to go to, or Friday night, and then there was some event Sunday afternoon, so they were constantly going. Places. So I spent a lot of time with cousins and aunts, babysitters, or with my brother, and so that's what I remember. And I remember the election night and the excitement leading up to the election. I don't remember any of the the other details, but and how sad it was that night. I remember my brother was very upset, that when he lost that election, but. I guess you learn from that too. So,
and you went to Ansonia High School, or
I went to Ansonia. I went to public school in Ansonia.
When did you graduate high school?
1980.
Okay.
1980.
And did you know law enforcement? Was that always something you had an eye on?
I thought about it, kind of off and on. I went to college a little bit. That didn't work out right away. I wasn't quite ready for that, so I worked, and then. Got in with a company out of Derby doing carpentry with Kenny Weldon, and then ended up with Haynes Construction, and then in February of '90 came here as an officer. And then, of course, I waited till I didn't take the traditional college route where you do it like right out of high school and get it over with. Mm-hmm. I waited till I was working full-time with a mortgage with young kids before I decided.
I better do something.
It's a much easier route that way to get your college, 3 college degrees, so that's what I did.
And maybe this is, I could be totally wrong, but for when I remember growing up, because my father was a police officer and my brother was a police officer, both retired, but that's the way they did it too. And from what I remember, in those days, it really wasn't completely normal for a police officer to high school, college, get their criminal justice degree, and then become a police officer. It always happened the other way. So, and is that true? Because it wasn't like that was unusual. No,
there was. You probably had a mixture of that because, but it just I laugh about it now. It wasn't so funny then when I was going through it and you work whatever shift, and then the kids were little, and studying and trying to mow the lawn and shovel the driveway and study and drive to class.
Where were you taking classes in those days in the early 90s?
So my associate's degree was from Naugatuck Valley Community College. I was criminal justice, and then I had credits from other colleges and whatnot, and I put that together at Charter Oak State College. That's up on Central's campus, and then I got my bachelor's in 2005. And then I got right into a master's program. I did that online, which was like the single most difficult thing I've ever done.
Yeah, I can't. Why do all that? Because I mean, you could have you had the job as a police officer. You're obviously working 40 hours a week at least.
Right.
Why bother trying to get all those degrees?
I liked school. And it was. I knew I could do it. I didn't do it when I should have done it. But
Did you feel like there was something to prove?
There was a little bit. You know what? I knew I could do it. I knew I could handle it. But then I also, I had 2 degrees in criminal justice, and it was kind of pointless to me to get another one. I mean, what else? So I went out and got an MBA, something different, and kind of figuring that once I finished law enforcement, I'd go do something else. So that was, part of the plan back then. So that was 2008 when I got that. When I earned that.
And so to become a police officer, to make that leap, though, what were your first days like on the job like? And in those days, from what I hear, Ansonia, I guess was different, maybe had a higher crime rate. I wasn't even born in 1990. No, yeah, I was. But
yeah, don't try to run that by me, Eugene. I know better.
Yeah. Yeah. But so what was it like being a police officer in those early days?
It was... it was certainly different. The times change, obviously. The West Side looked different. The Riverside complex was very active. It was bustling. It was filled to capacity, and the neighborhoods were still somewhat like when I was growing up. They're all changed now. That there are different demographics throughout the city, and I knew that coming in where different sections were. I can tell you my first day. And then the training then was different than now. I spent 14 weeks in the academy. Now it's 24, 25. Field training for me was about 2 weeks. Now it's a minimum 12 weeks required.
Oh, wow. So they just kind of throw you out there in the community where you grew up.
Yeah, and it was and I had the advantage because I knew all the streets. That's always important for new officers coming in. If they're not from Ansonia, you got to know the geography, because if you have to know the difference between Holbrook Place, Holbrook Court, and Holbrook Street. You gotta know which end of Kimberly you're going to. So there are.
I'm laughing because how often there'll be a fire call somewhere, and it takes me a half hour to get there because I go to the wrong one.
The wrong one,
and I'd be a terrible police officer.
We have
Lawsuit City. It would be with me.
We have there's 2 Sheesbees and they don't connect. There's 2, and it's from projects that never got completed years and years ago. So I remember my first day out on the road, 15 minutes out, and we had to make an arrest at Stop and Shop for shoplifting, this young woman. And, of course, he blames me, but my FTO locked the keys in the cruiser. Now, we didn't have cell phones. He said, wait here.
What was his name? Is he still...
No,
you don't have to name him.
He's not here anymore. He retired. And, we still laugh about that because he blames me because I was the new guy.
Right, of course.
And so he said, wait here. So I had to stand in the middle of that was probably in the end of June, and hot day at Stop and Shop, 3:30 in the afternoon, people everywhere. I'm standing there with this handcuffed.
You'd already arrested the person.
Oh yeah, brought her out and realized the keys. I could see the keys dangling. So he had to go in and use the phone on the deck because we had no cell phones, and call and ask for a spare key to come down. And so people who I knew were walking by, and they're looking at me, and it was the strangest thing. And she's laughing. She was actually a good sport about it. So so that's how it started. That was the omen right there. That's how it started.
And then we've heard from. Maybe it was other... You know what it was? I think it was Chief Metzler was talking about the retired Seymour police chief who had been in Ansonia for a number of years. And he was talking, I think, about sort of how Riverside in those days, or the federally subsidized housing was... that thing was kind of a disaster just in terms of how it was designed. If like you wanted to do something bad, that was the perfect place to do it, just because it faced inward.
Right.
And I heard it was open air drug market
Right.
back in the day.
Right.
So was it as bad as, or is it? Sometimes these things get romanticized a little bit in a weird way. But was it as bad as we've heard?
It was. It was a horrible design. It was a security nightmare. And Chief Metzler was 100% right, because he walked through there before I did. But just a caveat to that, unfortunately, the people that lived there then had that stigma, and it was unfair because I knew a lot of the people that lived in there. I grew up. I went to school with a lot of them, and good and decent people, and they didn't deserve that stigma. What was happening was you had maybe some people in there that were up to no good, and they were bringing people in from the outside. But I remember how busy it was, the traffic, just cars driving through there, and there were two of us walking through there 24 hours a day. You couldn't leave there. There were two we called them horseshoes. You had the first shoe, the big one, and the smaller one on the north side of High Street. You'd walk through there and go up on the stairwells, and the lights would be knocked out. It'd be pitch black, and you couldn't see anything. And if an officer drove by in the street, he couldn't see us up. It was a terrible design. It was designed back in the 50s or 60s for without the thought of security going forward.
But you don't see, even if they went back and they're supposed to eventually, HUD is supposed to replace something at the former Riverside, but they won't be anything like those old.
Oh, I hope not.
Those old sort of institutional-like structures.
Yeah, I hope not. And you felt like it was hot in the summer because it was all asphalt. And you'd see the kids out there, and you'd try to, play ball with them or whatever, and talk to them. And I felt. Felt that they were the people that lived there were working or trying to raise their kids or living a good life, trying to live the right way, were stigmatized unfairly because, again, not everybody, most people in there were good people.
Yeah. So that coming down is all around a good thing.
Yeah, I think
there's really no negatives about that not being there.
No, it became unhealthy. The buildings were, just old and super expensive, I guess, to maintain. Boiler system was $1 million or something, some crazy number. And
then by the end, I remember Jody Mosger, now Jody Gill, did a story looking at the crime rate there had actually, because everyone thought, if there's a crime, it was Riverside. Like they just got people who live there got blamed for everything under the sun, and still do to some extent.
Exactly.
Because now the theory is, it's everybody who moved out of Riverside is now committing crimes everywhere else, which there's really no truth to that, I don't think. But it had actually become a much safer place at the end. There were definitely spikes and occasional violence, but how did that turn around, do you think? Or was it just that people were moving out?
No. There was a very specific reason for that. In 2007, the United States Supreme Court passed ruled on a case out of Virginia, which allowed local housing authorities to ban people from their property who did not have a legitimate reason to be there. So we came up with a policy, meaning the police department met with the housing authority and devised a plan, and then we got the state's attorney's office involved because there would likely be prosecutions, and we said, hey, we want to be able to ban people who don't have a legitimate good reason to be there. And so what we did was the officers at the time knew. They knew everybody in there, and if they knew if somebody's who was he or she connected with. So if somebody was just hanging out on a bench and drinking and causing trouble, and they weren't there for a specific reason, we would give them a warning and we'd ask them to leave. And if they came back, then we would bar them, and a third trip back, they would get arrested for criminal trespass. And the prosecutor's office in Derby supported us on that, and they prosecuted cases. And so we were able to force out people that we knew that were in there, whether they were dealing drugs or they were just causing trouble for the people that were trying to,
just live their lives,
lives there. And it made, it didn't eliminate all of it, but it really went a long way. And so that was the impetus for the steep decline in crime over there. It really was.
And then one thing, and I'm backtracking here, and I apologize to bounce around,
Sure.
but whatever, I'm not a professional broadcaster. You had mentioned you took a job on the Ansonia Police Department. Part of the motivation was you have a mortgage, wife, family to support. How many children do you have?
4.
4, and it's all boys, right?
No, I have 3.
I apologize.
No, 3 sons and a daughter.
Okay, and what's their age range?
So the oldest one he'll be 26 in a couple of weeks, and I have the youngest are twins, and they're 21. And I have a 24-year-old.
Oh, wow. So you had everybody,
yeah.
when you started, it was a whole bunch, it was a house full of little kids.
Yeah, I had 4 under the, we had, we had 4 under the age of 5.
Are they any of them going into law enforcement?
The boys talk about it. They're all in the military right now.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
They're all active duty. So I think their goal is, I think 2 were talking law enforcement, 1 may be the fire service, but, some sort of public service. And my daughter is a senior in college. She's going to graduate, and she's off to applying now to grad school. She wants to be an occupational therapist. So it's been I know you have young ones, and it's very quick.
I can't even imagine.
It's very quick.
I don't even know, and I can't imagine. I mean, having 4, that's just
listen. Once you have 2, then it's just a piece of cake.
Whatever. You don't even know the youngest name, do you? And what's your wife's name? Because I don't want
Carrie.
Carrie. And how did you guys meet, if I may ask?
Well, we met at Griffin Hospital in the late 70s. We both had our first job there, working in the dietary section in the kitchen. And we all became friends, and we knew each other off and on, and started dating in the early 80s and married in 87.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, how many brothers and sisters did you have?
1 brother.
Okay, so Gary Hale is sort of a preeminent. We launched in 2009. Like Gary Hale is like the legend.
Yeah.
Gary Hale. Like we'd always hear this name. So, and he must have been when you were a police officer too. He is Gary Hale. I don't know where I'm going with this question, but what was it like having a brother who was politically involved, sort of a mover and shaker in the city and in the state at large? Negative for you, or positive, or
no, and Gary's terrific. He's of course I'm just a little biased, but
maybe
he's
your older brother.
He's older brother.
Okay.
Yep. Gary's one of the brightest people I ever met. And yeah, he had when he was younger, I remember the energy. He loved politics. He was a big, huge fan of the Kennedys, JFK and Robert, the whole family. He could recite he could sit here for hours and just recite the whole. He was a history, crazy on history. He knows more about American history than he ought to be teaching it, really. Really young, got into politics, and you can just see he had this. People who knew far more than I did, said he's this brilliant career ahead of him, and he became an attorney, and then he ended up in the state senate. So he's a state senator from the 17th, where Senator Logan. So it's this area. And
excuse my ignorance, because I didn't grow up. What time period was that? Was that like
so? He was what was he, 86 to 92?
Okay, so around that time period.
So he was in the Senate when I became a police officer. But to Gary's credit, he always tried to, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, try to downplay, never use that influence, never tried to, try to let me go and do what I had to do. So he tried to lessen his own status, if you will, when I was doing that. So it was and it was... through no one's fault. People, you're the senator's brother.
There's always that, yeah. You guys are walking stereotypes. It's like he's the politician, you're the police officer.
All that.
As an Irishman, I can say that. I think.
Yes, no, absolutely, absolutely, and I've heard it. He got you your job and all that, and that became just funny after a while, But he's still terrific. We're very close.
Was that tough though? That type of talk in the beginning, like when you were first chief, because you're chief 19 years, 18 years.
It's 18 years. Pat Lynch will tell you it's 19 because it's technically the years are 19, but I'm trying to be more accurate. So,
did you feel you had to sort of prove something to people who thought, it's King Hale's brother is now the chief?
I even heard it. You're the mayor's son. And this, well, he was mayor for 40 years.
That's true.
You know, after a while, I heard it, and after a while, I said, I'm not going to worry about it. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to do what I have to do, and go out and take care of business on my own, and that's what I did. And so I still hear it occasionally, and I laugh it off now at this point because it's not worth. I know what I did. I know how things went.
And after this long on the job, obviously,
you
must have some idea. That's all been unproven because.
Right. So,
your guy, we don't hear, me and Ethan tried, believe me, Ethan Fry and I, you go out to Archie Moore is at, I wasn't going to say where. You run into various people and, hey, what's Kevin Hale really like? What's it? And your own people have never said a bad word about you, which is, impressive because we try, so.
Well, that's your job.
Yeah, right. You try, come on, this can't be true. But you're one.
And after 18 years, that's a long time. Chief Metzler was 30 in this position. The national average is under 4 for chiefs of police.
Chief Metzler's a freak, though.
Yeah, 30 years.
That's wow.
That's him very. I was with him yesterday at a meeting. And he hasn't stopped smiling, by the way, since June.
Well, I was going to, because you were saying you don't want to sort of be the lame duck. Chief Metzler sort of embraced that, because we went, when there was some type of power outage in Seymour, we went to the department, and it was basically Lieutenant Sikowski or deputy chief at the time, doing stuff. And Chief Metzler made a show of just sort of like coming in his shorts.
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Just here to get the mail. He was quite the character.
Listen, let me go back. I don't mean to demean anybody who, he did a long, and that's fine. That was his. This is my thing. This is my thought process. Not that mine is right. It's just his was different, and that's okay. Just this is the path that I chose. This is the plan that I had, and this is what I wanted.
This podcast is sponsored by ValleyGivesBack.org. What will you be remembered for? Name a Valley nonprofit in your estate plan and create a legacy that tells future generations what mattered to you. Making a gift that costs nothing during your lifetime is easy and revocable if things change. With a planned gift, you have the power to impact the Valley forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Your action inspires others to make a difference in their own way. Remember the Valley. Ask your accountant, financial planner, or attorney about planned giving options. Plan now. Give later. Impact tomorrow. Learn more at valleygivesback.org. Were there any particular challenges you faced when you were first chief in the city in particular? Like what was happening in the city? Was there any immediate needs that had to be addressed when you first took the job? Because obviously like Ansonia of the towns we cover it sort of has the most, it's still a small town, and Derby as well, but you get sort of the big city crime things happen.
Right.
Occasionally, I guess.
Right, and that was continuing. So again, going back to Riverside, that was pre Virginia versus Hicks, which was the Supreme Court case, by the way. Pre that, so it was still very active over there, and we were, that was always a contention, a point of concern, not contention, point of concern for us, because again, you had kids over there, you had grandmothers living there, and you had these other jerks coming in, creating problems, shooting their guns off, and so there was also some contention with the housing authority then, and all those folks are going. It's gotten much better since then. So trying to get on the same team. So it was there was no grace period, if you will. It was kind of you hit the ground running, and I had good people. I was from the department, so I know who I had. I knew who I can count on, and people I've been hired with, and so forth. And we knew what the issues were, and we knew what we should do to straighten things out, to improve things, and attack these areas. And so, I got right into it. We got right into it. There was no honeymoon.
And then in terms of the thing I want to ask, and I asked Chief Metzler the same thing too, I would assume it's a challenge to sort of keep politics out of what you have to do? I mean, that's important, obviously, because you can't run your department on the whims of whoever's in City Hall.
Correct.
How have you managed to do that? Like, how have you managed to sort of, or maybe you haven't, I don't know, but how do you keep the politics out of the day-to-day operations of the police department?
Well, that's a critical task, because you can't have that. You can't have politics in anywhere in your police department. That's just bad. It's just for so many different reasons. I always felt it was my job to be the buffer. I'm going to let, if we have a sensitive investigation, we're going to, regardless of who the mayor or the alderman, whoever it was, when talking, listen, we're going to let the chips fall where they may. We're going to do the investigation, and our officers are going to do what they have to do, and that'll be it. And so I would be the buffer, and that's not easy. That's not an easy task. Because I don't want the officers, and I would tell my officers, well, Chief, what do you think about, there's going to be some maybe politicians that are concerned. Don't worry about that. You do your job. I'll take care of that. I'll worry about that. You do your job. I'm not going to get in your way. And you let them do their job, and they're able to do a better job doing that. They don't have to worry about influence. They don't have to worry about anybody other than me or the bosses within the department running that. So,
and an example, like and I don't know if this ever happened, but like an alderman calls up and says, "Hey, there's an issue on this block." The police officer just doesn't run over there just because he's an alderman. Is that sort of the?
Yeah, right. That's part of it. Like an alderman, and I dealt with them for, I was trying to think of how many have been sitting there over the years. There's a lot. There's been a lot of aldermen in now.
Yeah, there's a lot, and I mean, they have a gigantic board.
They
of
do have a
aldermen
big board, yes, and always. And so I remember a lot of good people in there, and I actually thanked them last meeting, which is my last meeting, because that's a thankless job, and they don't get, they have to. It's a lot of work, a lot of volunteer hours, and thankless. They don't get a lot of pats in the back, but. If there was a particular issue, I would be glad to work with them in their neighborhoods. But sometimes I had to tell them, listen, we can't help you with that. That's a civil matter, or we can't take your side because maybe you're wrong, And so that required some, and that's happened on occasion.
What about the fact that, and maybe this is a nonsense question, but from my perspective, I've never seen the city so divided politically, and maybe it's just because I read Facebook too much, like on the Ansonia community page. But this whole thing with the Board of Ed versus the alderman, and the alderman versus the alderman. It's sort of sometimes soul draining to read it all and to be a buffer for it all. Have you seen Ansonia get any more political in recent years, or is it just that it's just separate from what you do every day?
Well, there's a couple of different points there. It is obviously I've never seen what's happening now. I've never seen this before in all the years. This is new.
Oh, okay.
With the Board of Ed and the alderman at where there's litigation and all that.
That's different.
So yeah, so I've never seen that. I really hope for everybody's sake that gets resolved. However they resolve it, and I'm not. I'm independent of that. That's between them, but it doesn't. It's got to get resolved one way or another. Hopefully sooner rather than later, so everybody can move forward. I paid attention as I should have to the political winds over the years because I have to. Try to keep the department out of all of it. Obviously, when we go through a budget. As we're going through now, you have to defend and support your department and put out an operating budget. And sometimes you're competing against other departments. But again, that's not new to here. But in terms of the politics and how that I kind of watch it from afar and pay attention. But certainly the last thing I want to do is immerse the police department into that. So we were cautious while still doing our jobs. So that's where it would get tricky at times. But then I would just tell people, listen, flat out, whether it was a mayor or an alderman, and they were all good about it and never really had a complaint. Listen, we're not going to get involved. We're not going to be immersed. We're not going to get dragged into this political stuff. We have to be as neutral as we can because otherwise people lose confidence in us. And there are people who will say, "Wow, that's not true. You did," and so the fact that people disagree with what we're doing or what I'm doing likely means that we did it right, because you can't please everybody. You can't even begin to try. Right? You know, if everybody's happy, then you're not doing anything.
How about in terms of, and again, I'm switching gears, but in terms of criminal cases or arrests, or when you look back, is there anything you're particularly that stands out as sort of a feather in the cap that maybe you got the bad guy?
Yeah, there's been we have some great officers in the past and currently, and dedicated, and we had the Hilltop burglary issue a few years back, where a young guy was going into houses at night, occupied, walking into bedrooms and walking by people while they were asleep, which is about as frightening as it can get, because you're in the safety of your own home, and it's at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're asleep, and if you hear it, you don't even know what your name is when you wake up, and to have somebody in your home, that's and you have kids and so forth, that's about as bad as it gets, and so we put a lot of resources up there, and we spent a lot of time on that case. And I don't know if you were there, but we had a block watch meeting, a neighborhood meeting at the Hilltop Hose Company, and there had to be 300 people there, which was great. And they were actually really, they're obviously very concerned about all the neighbors up there, but it really turned out to be a positive meeting. And we made an arrest shortly thereafter. And that was...
Is that the one where the person ran into, like, Derby over the border?
Ran over the border, and so we were able to...
Sunset Drive or
Yep.
something? Oh, yeah, okay.
That's
yes.
the one.
Yeah, okay.
So that was really, that was a big one. There are some of the drug dealers that we've taken down over the years that, we've partnered up with, our federal partners, the DEA and the FBI. And I always felt that if you'd bring in Interpol if you had to solve something, it didn't matter who got the credit for it. Just get it done, get the job done.
And there was the one a few years back where you had like the press conference at the Armory. Yes, I believe it was sort of a was that one of the larger ones you had over the years? Because I remember that those particular group of people, it was like there was 4 people who were getting arrested in Derby and Ansonia all the time in like 2009 to 2011 or so. Right. And then it turned out to be they were, I guess they've been convicted. They were just running drugs all throughout Ansonia and Derby, and had kind of a complicated setup. Is that something has it gotten harder to catch drug dealers? The days of that of like street corner sales don't really happen. Well, as far as I know.
Right. So what happens that day? I think we hit 10 at the same time in 4 or 5 different communities. So we had to partner up with. That was a logistical challenge to put that together, because it wasn't just Ansonia officers everywhere. We had Ansonia at each one, but you had to rely on. I think it was Hamden and Derby, and so great coordination, and that was a highly successful venture, and so that worked out well. I think one of the things I'm most proud of was creating the anti-crime unit, the ACU, because that forced, to get to your point of traditional drug dealing versus the changes they've made. We forced them to change. We told them, we sent them a good stiff arm saying, listen, we're not going to have this in these neighborhoods anymore. You're going to have to go, or you're going to get locked up, or you're going to have to, so they ended up changing their methods quickly. And
you'd have to first they were burying drugs places, I remember, under stash houses.
Oh yeah.
And then they'd arrange through text messages. It was all sort of much smarter than me. If the guys put their energy somewhere else,
and they, so they changed their tactics. So we changed our tactics, and we, again, the DEA, and we asked statewide narcotics to come in. We worked hand in hand with Derby and Seymour, especially Derby, because it seemed like it was just such a crossover daily, back and forth.
Same people.
There were no borders. It was just so we're dealing with the same people, and they would gather intelligence. We'd meet, and we'd talk, and change strategies, and wiretaps, and it was a great police work to chase to get, and we were successful because a lot of those guys and some of those people they need to be incarcerated.
I noticed a couple of them are out, or they go. It's amazing.
And once a case gets to court, we move on, because the courts have their own sets of rules. They have their own protocols. They have their own rules that they have to follow. And so we just tell our guys, don't, just move on. Don't pay attention, because you may or may not like the result over there. But again, you
make yourself crazy, I would imagine. Sometimes.
Right, but you don't know what they're dealing with either.
Yeah.
You don't know what rule. I mean, we make an arrest. Well, they may have 25 arraignments that day, so we don't know that. We don't know what their burdens are. So to be fair, just move on. Just if they need you, then they need you. Just keep doing your job, and that's so. The crime unit.
And is it still around? Is it
still
as fully staffed as it was?
It's not as fully staffed as it was. If I'd always wanted to have that, and it never seemed like the right time, really financially, because there's a cost to it. Mm-hmm. You're pulling, some people out of patrol, and you may have to backfill and pay them overtime, because drug dealers don't work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And anti-crime meant all crime, not just drugs, but that's just the way they.
That's what they're dealing with at that time period.
And then, so we had on successive Wednesdays, murders, 2 successive Wednesdays, murders in Ansonia. One on Hill Street and one on Wakely Avenue. And
those are the 2 unsolved ones? Or
yeah, there are.
You're pretty sure who did it, but it's not enough to get an arrest warrant at this point, is
right? But we're still working that,
okay.
But those are. You're still looking at, regardless of when you have these cases, you have sometimes in street crime, you have people that were, and it happens all over the place. Maybe they were part of the drug trade. I'm not saying these guys were, but maybe they're part of the drug trade and they were murdered. But they're still somebody's family. It's still somebody's kid, brother, father. So, that can't get lost. You can't lose sight of that. So those are still, we still talk about those cases. We still work on those cases. We'd love to bring people to justice on those, just like in every case. I remember early 90s, I was the youth officer for a while, and there was a case where a little girl was sexually assaulted. And I was never able, I knew who did it, and I just couldn't get there, and that still bothers me. And that's got to be 27 years ago. So yeah, you remember those. You absolutely remember those. But anyways, the ACU developed after that second one. I think Wakely Avenue was the second one. I said, well, there is no good time to form the ACU. We're just going to form it and put it together. And they hit the ground running, man. They did a great job. I can't tell you how many guns. I think 6 guns they took off the street, and a couple hundred arrests and hundreds of search warrants and arrest warrants.
And how many officers were formerly in the anti-crime unit?
3.
Wow. Okay.
So we had, and then we had a structure to it, and the goal was twofold. It was to attack street crime first and foremost, but it was also to train officers how to develop informants and how to do that kind of work, because not everybody gets to do that. So what we had a number of officers that I'd assigned to the federal task forces, and they learned from there how to develop informants and how to build cases. And so they came back and trained. So we were rotating people through the ACU and developing this group of officers that just became, even when they went back to patrol, the goal was that they would be better officers because they knew how to develop these cases now. And so the goal is to get back to that, and we're hopefully getting close to getting that back up to where it needs to be.
And one thing I wanted to ask you about was race relations in the city of Ansonia. I mean, obviously nationally over the last few years, at least from what you read, I mean, there's been a real divide between minority communities and police departments. It seemed to have, it's depressing that it's 2019 and we still hear these things.
Right.
And I know there has been, I remember a big meeting a few years back in Ansonia where you talked to people about how to improve or what you were doing, because there weren't any specific Ansonia incidents from what I remember. But I remember there was, you had talked about the efforts to hire, to represent the community. And Ansonia is, if anything, a wildly diverse community. How has that gone for the department? Do you think you can do a better job in terms of hiring qualified minority, non-white officers?
So that was at the senior center, and it was all 4 Valley police chiefs. Chief Metzler was there, Chief Narowski. I think Chief Seguera was there from Shelton. It was right over down the street here. And funny that there was a young man who got up. His name's Sean Mendenhall, African American, and he made some comments. And he was actually in our hiring he had applied. We actually hired him. He's on the street right now for us, doing a great job.
Oh, no kidding.
So, okay. Excuse me. What we see in the news and social media certainly doesn't help with that.
What do you mean?
Well, social media is great for so many things, and like you, I don't have Facebook. I just don't.
Oh no, I have Facebook. I don't. You're not on it. Yeah, that's why you look better than I do, even though you're a little older.
I don't have any desire. Just one more thing to do.
Yeah, it's.
But in terms of law enforcement and social media, if we have an incident at a school, for instance, parents are aware of it before we're even arriving, and then we have and granted, listen, parents are concerned, but if there's an incident, then hundreds of text messages are being sent out to parents and whatever, and maybe the media, and we don't even know who's involved or what's happening, and we're already being bombarded by parents and maybe the media and so forth, saying, "Hey, what's going on? What are you doing about this? How come you guys?" And it really puts us at a disadvantage. So we never had to deal with that years ago. We're learning to deal with it now. We're adjusting to that now. But getting back to that meeting, and that was facilitated by Greg Johnson, who I have a good relationship with. Now he's the
executive director of the local chapter of the NAACP.
Chapter, yes, and we've had our differences over the years, and we acknowledge that, and but we try to get together 2 or 3 times a year, have breakfast, and just talk. How's his family? He asks how am I, and that type of thing. Hey, what's going on? What do you hear in the community? And he'll tell me things, and he said, "Hey, can you check? I had this complaint. Can you check into this situation?" And I'll look into it. I'll get back to him. And again, we don't always agree, but you and I can say the same thing. So, but
you can't cut people off, I guess. Because I remember, like the big one, and we covered it too, was Officer Salahuddin, the former police officer. The local media, not us, this is before we existed, deemed that case the garden hose cop.
Right.
And I would expect, and he was acquitted. There was a trial, it went all the way to trial, and he was
Right.
quickly acquitted of, I think, a larceny,
Right.
if I remember correctly.
Right.
But was that sort of the low point of, because there was a lot of talk in the community that, well, this was, for Mr. Salahuddin himself, because of his religion and wearing a beard. I don't remember the exact. How did you deal with that? Because there was a lot of that going around.
Yeah, that was a tough time. That was a challenging time. I mean, I'm not going to get into the details of all that. That's all been looked at and hashed out in multiple venues. I did what I thought I should do at that point. I said it then. I say it now. I had nothing to do with anybody's race or religion. It was a case that I thought. Again, I did what I thought I should do in that case. That was difficult. There's an attorney involved that.
Was there anything like, was that sort of if you look back at anything lows over that period, does that, I mean, obviously a low would be having to tell someone that they lost a loved one. I mean, that's,
right.
But in terms of sort of the management, was that the toughest thing to deal with? And was there any lessons that came out of it, do you think? That's a reporter question, but whatever.
Right. Well, I think at the time, so there was a lot of discussion. Again, we're a small police department. So a lot of discussion. Say, listen, you're going to read a lot of things. You're going to hear a lot of things. But we all still have a job to do. And so that's point number one. That's the most important point. And if you're out on your, patrolman, if you're out on patrol, you're on your shift, and you're not focused on what you're doing, you're worried about or thinking about something else, then you're not paying attention, and you're not focusing on what you're supposed to be doing. And so your risks become greater because you're not, you're becoming complacent. Don't become complacent. It's always been the enemy. So a lot of those discussions. And officers had, everybody had their own opinions. We got through that. It took some lumps. Of course you learn. Could have been better at communicating things through that whole process, but it's not everything is not everything's going to be roses, especially in this position. Old chief told me a long time ago. There's only two types of chiefs: those in the barrel and those waiting to get in the barrel. And that's which one are you? And everybody gets a turn or two or three. And if you stay there, Chief Metzer, I've been here 18, he was there 30. He was in the barrel probably more times than I was, by virtue of his longevity. It's part of the job. But just to finish that point, Eugene. So from that meeting, we took several points and we started a process where we go up to the high school and we meet regularly now with the students up there. And so we'll get 2 or 3 classrooms together in the auditorium, and it'll be 4 or 5 police officers, and they come in with these questions and index cards, and we give a little talk about what we do. And the essence of that, I guess, and they ask hard questions, and we answer them, and they may or may not agree. But my point to them, when I open that every time, is listen, whatever you call what we're doing here was not being done in Ferguson. I don't know what they were doing, but they were doing the opposite down there because there was bitter hatred between law enforcement and the community. And it was a whole different community, a whole different environment down there. But I said, the point is we want to meet with you, and we're not going to resolve all our problems because there's 80 kids and we have 45 minutes to talk, but at least you can hear from us. You can hear why we can ask for your ID when you're in the back seat of a car and your friend went through a stop sign. You know that the Supreme Court allows us to get everybody out of the car and look through and so they understand that. And we want you to not get all your information from social media, from Twitter and Instagram and all.
YouTube, there's a lot of,
ask a question, ask us. Don't just take somebody's word for it. Be open-minded in making your own decisions. And if after all that you still don't agree with what we do, that's fine. I can't change that, but at least you heard from us, and maybe we can continue to talk. And so we've been doing that about 4 years now. It was right after that incident. We did similar things with the Boys and Girls Club throughout the valley, so hopefully we can do that again. So we've gotten a lot of positive feedback, but it just seemed like the right thing to do. And just telling them, listen, if you have a problem with the way the officer treated you, don't resolve it there. Comply, then complain. All right, if the officer's going to give you a ticket and you think that he was rude to you or disrespectful, or that you're being issued a ticket because of your race or ethnicity, just take the ticket and then complain to the police department, any police department, where it happens later on. And this way, we don't have an unnecessary incident. Just comply, then complain, and we'll look into the matter later on.
The one last thing I wanted to ask you about, because it's been almost an hour, unless there's other things you want to talk about. The police department moving from your 1,000-year-old one-room schoolhouse thing, where like the jail is a former water closet or whatever it is, and there's rats, and I don't know if there's rats. I may be playing this up a little, but when is that ever going to happen? I don't think it's ever going to happen. There's never. I know there was a press release saying there was like ceiling tiles being removed, which I thought, well, that's an odd press release. But
that's the.
I can say that now because I'm down to I'm the last man standing. So
that's the pessimist in you coming out.
Yeah,
you keep us grounded with that, and that's good. That's good. No, we just had a meeting. There's a building committee. We just met again last week. We meet twice a month. I'm going to be speaking with the architect today. He's meeting with the engineers today. So we are on schedule to hopefully have a bid opening in late spring. And the ceiling tiles had to come down because
I'm just kidding.
No, but listen, you brought it up, so I'm going to address it.
All right.
So the ceiling tiles came down.
The ceiling tiles came down.
Yeah, well, but understand,
wasn't the thing supposed to be built already?
Understand that there's an acre of ceiling tiles.
Oh, okay.
So the engineers want to see what's above the ceiling tiles to get an idea as to to run all the mechanicals, heat, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and so forth.
And what we're talking about is there's supposed to be a new police department built downtown at the former Farrell. You describe where it
it's
is.
the former Farrell's Engineering Building. Okay. It's the new address is 505 East Main Street. It's the building on Upper Main Street where the Maple Street Bridge comes in. It has the double parking deck and then the 2 floors of office space above it. So we're going to be on the top floor, overlooking downtown Ansonia and the beautiful Naugatuck River, looking at your office here.
If we're still here.
Yes.
When it's completed in 2050.
No.
Sorry.
Come on.
All right, I'm being positive. But how? Any qualms about retiring as that move or that whole thing is being unfolding? So spring 2019, you said opening bids for it.
Right. So you're looking at a mid, conservative mid to late 2020 grand opening, moving in. So it'd take about a year, 10 months to a year to do the job. So we're on schedule for that. So there are, you're not seeing a lot there, but there was a lot being done. And while the architect is designing it, and that takes months because they have to design every light switch and every outlet and everything else. And police departments are complex. They're not designing like just an office building. So there's a lot involved, special air systems and the whole cell holding block area and the evidence storage and all that. So prisoner transportation and all that. So that's moving along. In terms of me leaving, people ask me, well, listen, you drove this, I was a big part of the referendum in 2016. To me, that was the hard part. Because if the citizens said no, then our interview would have ended already because we wouldn't be talking about that. So to me, that was the hardest part, is getting permission, the approval by the taxpayers to spend $12 million to do this. And so that was done. That was a great victory. And so now, there's a lot of hard work still to go, but there's a good, strong building committee working, with Sheila, and Sheila O'Malley's on the committee, talk to her almost daily on this, certainly 3 times a week on this. Okay. A lot of things going on there. So the committee, the good thing about a good, strong committee is that if one member leaves, it still goes. So I'm not indispensable, nor should I be indispensable. Now, you're indispensable because you're the only. So if you go, then that's it. But I'm not indispensable.
People already think I'm gone. What are you talking about?
So, is there ever a right time? I don't know if there's ever a right time. I just said, it feels like now's the right time. The building's moving along, and it's going to get done whether I'm here or not. And I'll come back someday and take a walk through and say, well, nice job, good for you. And
you think that's the best location for it?
It is. I listen, we're on Main Street. I like the way that, but our access is going to be East Main Street. We're going to be downtown. It helps downtown geographically near the center of the city. Where Elm Street is how it is. There's no parking.
There's no parking at all.
There's no parking. It's 125 years old now.
How many police officer or police cruiser accidents have you had come? Because that's a crazy intersection to begin with.
Yeah, if you go around so it'd be the northwest corner of the building where the Sally Port is. That was an add-on in 1980. They added that on. That wasn't there. The corner up to about Fender height has been chipped away.
Because it's just that turn is impossible.
But it's hard because there's a handicapped parking spot right there. So you really have to pay attention. Going around, and there's cars parked on the left. You really have to pay attention. So that's been hit quite a few times over the years.
So are you gonna save that corner for posterity?
No, I'm gonna forget the address. We're gonna forget the location and come down here and move on.
And that's it. All right, Chief Hale. Is there anything else you wanted to touch upon that I haven't raised? I know there's a million other things. Yeah. We could talk about. So I hope I hope I didn't mess this up. But
no, I just obviously family first. We talked about my terrific family, and I appreciate you bringing up my parents. And I lost. They're both gone. You think about them all the time. My wife's terrific. My kids are awesome. But the people that I work with, there are going to be things that I miss in this job, and things that maybe I don't miss as much. I can tell you that I'm not going to miss night meetings. And people may say, "Wow, what's the big deal?" Well, it's been 18 years of night meetings and away from kids and basketball games and so when they were younger, and so now I'm not going to miss that. But I developed relationships over the years. throughout the city with people. Met a lot of great people, a lot of people I knew before growing up here. But the people in that building are pretty special to me. You know, I was hired with a number of them, and I've been fortunate enough to be part of the hiring process. I think over 30 of them, and some that have left, and many that are still here. And you know, I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss them because you develop those relationships, and you know, you find out how their kids are doing, and not just the cases they're working on, but the new car they bought or where they went on vacation, and just those conversations and laughing and joking with them. And that's, you know, that's going to be the hard part. That's going to be the hard part. They do a terrific job. They do a phenomenal job and a difficult job, not just in Ansonia, it's anywhere. You know, law enforcement has changed. Law enforcement officers are, you know, there are issues obviously with officers killed in the line of duty every year, but also the other issue that's just as big as officer suicide. And
you don't hear about that as much.
We're hearing more about it, but it's and I've experienced a couple of them since I've been here. One guy I went to the academy with, and those are hard situations. They really are. And so I have a concern. I'm always concerned with how officers are doing and what's going on, because you don't really know exactly what's going on, whether in their home life or what they're thinking about or whatever. And we see it too often in too many places that are too close. And so I worry about them. But that's the biggest part. I thank them for all they've done. You know, it's been, as I said, my honor to be the chief for so long and to deal with these terrific people. So that's what I'm going to miss more than anything.
All right, Chief Hale. On that note, I want to thank you, and I guess on behalf of the City of Ansonia residents, I'll put that hat on. Thank you for your service over the years.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing me.
When's the going away party?
I don't know.
All right.
I don't know. Not my call.
Somebody's got to get on that.
Well, maybe we'll have it here. It's probably big enough in here.
Can we use it as a fundraiser?
Sure.
All right. Thanks, Chief Hale.
Thank you, Eugene.